Well, welcome back to, what is this, part 9? I think it's part 9. So moving on with the paint job. Looks like it's got the measles or all these spots all over it, and I may come to regret doing these really dark blue panels here, there and everywhere. But the idea is to now spray all of this over and dull it all down with light passes of the lightest top coat, the lightest whole colour, to take away all that contrast and knock all that stuff all, right back down again. So but yeah, so you can see I've just broken up the main Aztec even further with just random panels here, there and everywhere, with a couple of shades of blue and some dirty greys and brown sort of colours. So yeah, that's the next job on the list anyway. So I'm going to get the lightest main whole colour ready in the spray gun and hose this down until it starts to blend away and start looking really nice and subtle. So I'll be back after I've done that, and then we'll move on to the next step. And there we go, that's the base coat sprayed over all that lot to knock all those measles down and make it all really nice and subtle. So that's the idea, that's what we're aiming for this whole time. Really, really subtle panel accents and colours, and the camera's not really picking up the blues and greys, but in person they are there. They're just really, really subtle, and like I say, that was the exact intention. So the closer you look, the more you see, and the further away you are, the more it looks like it's just kind of like a white ship. So if I come back here, a lot of that detail is sort of disappeared, although your eye does still pick it up. So it's one of those things, all these stages and all these steps just to get to something so subtle. You shouldn't think of it as noticing it, as it's more like you would notice if it wasn't there, rather than that you notice that something is there, if that makes sense. Your brain and your eye would notice more if it was plain colours and plain surfaces, and it would just kind of kill the illusion, and it'd be a bit of a scale buster. So there we go, all of that work, and I'm pretty pleased with the result. Looks really good. So moving on, we're going to start adding the signature blue tones, and I've mixed up 3 colours there, 3 different blue tones. They're pretty light, they may end up needing to be a little bit lighter, but I'll see. I'll mask off a few areas and do some painting, and then we'll see how stark they look. But another thing to bear in mind is, once the whole graphics go on this thing, they're going to be really quite bold on this really subtle white surface. So that is one thing to bear in mind. You don't want every single paint tone to be really, really light and subtle, because when you put your decals on, they're going to look like toy stickers in sort of comparison. I don't want that. So I'm going to get on mixing these paints up and get them in the airbrush and start masking some sections and areas and start getting these various blue tones on there for the signature areas. So I won't bother showing you that because I need to get a move on with this build, but I'll come back when that's done anyway. Right, we've leapt ahead yet again in the project. Apologies for that, but as I've said before, I'm sure in one of the previous videos, I really want to get this project done really quickly, as soon as I can. It's taken far too long at this point, much longer than I'd like for it to have taken, and the client's been really, really patient up until this point and understanding. So again, I'm very grateful for that and appreciate his patience, but I don't want to sort of take advantage of that, so I'm trying to get this done as quick as possible. So basically that means that I'm having to push ahead and get large chunks of this done without covering it on camera, but never mind. So there we go, pretty much all painted at this point. There's not a lot else to do aside from a few touch-ups here and there. Just pretty simple affair. There's a few shades of blue, a couple of greys, sort of mixed by eye. Don't ask me what I used and how what recipes I used. It was all done by eye at the time, so there ended up being 3 or 4 shades of blue and I think 2 shades of grey, plus a couple of other extra little bits like those yellow yellow details here and there. These RCS thrusters originally were going to be tackled with decals, but the stock sheet ones were too big, and so were the ones on the HDA sheet. So I painted those. There aren't any decals on this whatsoever. Everything that you see here is paint. So yeah, you can see all that detail in the paint job. Again, the camera can't really pick up the various shades of blues and greys on these tiny squares and these accents, but to my eye and like in person, you can see those subtle shades, and it really adds quite a lot of added detail. So yeah, not a lot else to say other than time to get assembling this thing and get the engines back or get them installed, the nacelles. So that'll be good, because then we'll have a completely assembled ship for the first time. So there are the engines. They've been fully painted now. I painted these inboard grills. It looks very shiny blue on camera at the moment, and that's because it's an iridescent blue gloss coat over black. Obviously the lighting is off, but it looks really shiny because of the angle of the light above it and the angle of the camera. During, or if you view this in ambient daylight, they look a lot darker, unless you catch it at the right angle and the right lighting conditions. But just the way that I'm set up at the minute, they look very blue, but they don't always look like that. So yeah, I'll get on with assembling this thing. That's the next thing on the list. That's the last major stage of assembly, is getting those engines on and getting the little phaser bumps. There's a load of those that need to go on, so I'll tackle those at the same time. So I'll be back after that's done. Hopefully there won't be another massive jump, but if there is, there is. There's not a lot I can do to avoid that. I just need to get this job done, so I'll be back in a second anyway. And just like that, she's all in one piece. And I did say earlier that this would probably happen, but again, apologies, but I need to get this thing finished ASAP. So there we go. All construction is complete, all painting is complete. The nacelles are rock solid, they're nice and parallel. The alignment of everything is pretty nice and true, about as good as you can expect for this kit, which is famous for being terrible in alignment and fitting and structure and all the rest of it, but all of the extra work that's gone into keeping it tight and true and strong in there it's all paying off now. So there we go, she's looking really good. Let me just throw the switch and you'll see the lighting system do its startup thing. Now it's all complete. You won't be able to see everything from this angle, but you'll get an idea anyway. So you get the windows, formation lights, and then the floodlights start flicking on in sequence. Difficult to see in these lighting conditions, and then she ramps up into the deflector ramps up into sort of impulse mode, or like station keeping mode, or whatever it is. And again, as usual, the lighting gets blown out by the camera. Not a lot I can do about that, particularly in these lighting conditions, but there we go. So we've got a couple of buttons on the control board. This is just a temporary board at the minute. This one is for the photons. There we go. And the other button is for the warp mode transition. So it goes from, you might be able to see the change here. So deflector dish goes down to a blue, and the inboard grills light up, and the impulse crystal and the impulse engine itself change state as well. You can see everything happening there. So there we go. Apologies if this is a really bad angle and looking a bit shoddy, but I'm not a cameraman. I glue bits of plastic and throw paint around, so there you go. So I'm really pleased with that. She's looking really good. Much better than I was expecting from this kit, but you know, it's taken a long time to get it there. It takes a lot of work. It's quite challenging to get it to this point, but really, really good to get there. So the next step is to get some gloss coats on this, seal everything in, just make doubly sure there's no tiny little touch-ups anywhere needed, and then I'll get the decal sheet out and we'll start finishing this thing, and hopefully it'll be on its way to the client in very short order. So I'll be back with that. Again, it might leap forward again, but probably won't too far because they went much further forward to leap. So I'll be back with that. I'll see you in another couple of seconds. Right then, first pass of decals are sorted out, and those are the strong back decals, the blowout panels going up the pylons, that stripe in the dorsal there, and all of the ones around the deflector housings. So really good. They all fit pretty well. I had a couple of gaps, particularly around the strong back decals there, but I was expecting that anyway, just from the way that I've sort of changed the stock kit layout slightly. So no dramas there. And the ones that fit around here fit really well. I was expecting them to be a bit of a hassle because they're intended for the stock kit deflector housing, and this is the old DLM part. So yeah, I was expecting some dramas but didn't get any. So that's good news. Now you might be able to tell on camera, it's kind of difficult to see, but you'll notice that these strong back parts are slightly saturated in a lighter blue than these ones, and that's not the decals doing that. That's that base coat of blue, and that's intentional because when you look at reference of the studio model, these panels are ever so slightly like more blue than these ones, if that makes sense. There's a bit more saturation in the color here than there is there. So, and that's captured that effect really well. Again, you can't really tell on camera that well, but to the eye it is noticeable enough at least. So yeah, really happy with that. So I'll be moving on now to the other hole markings. So I'll be back in another couple of minutes and moving on in leaps and bounds now. So I'll see you in a few seconds with a bit more progress. Well, moving on with the decals, got pretty much all of them on now, apart from a few small details here and there. And I should have seen it coming, but I just kind of took it for granted that the upgrade decals would be more accurate than they actually ended up being. But what a shock! This whole project has been a bit of an eye-opener when it comes to trusting the accuracy of so-called upgrade parts and accurate parts. But I'll get into that on the video wrap-up of this project, which I'm pretty close to by now. So getting back to these decals then, I've had to use a mixture of the HDA sheets and the original stock decal sheets. And to be fair, to give credit where it's due, the stock decal sheet is pretty good actually. I mean, the details aren't bang on, but they're certainly a lot better than a lot of the so-called upgrade accurate ones, which are miles off, and I just couldn't use them for various reasons. So, but first let's get on to these strong back decals. Now, fit wise, as I said before, they fit really well. I was pleasantly surprised, but in the end they ended up looking a little bit too bold. The colour choices just are a little bit too bold for my liking and the client's liking, so I ended up having to tone them down a little bit, and that ended up being a little bit of nerve-wracking process. But I ended up really carefully masking around the decals as close as I could and over the surrounding ones with some really low tack vinyl, and just really lightly sprayed over them with a coat or two of the lighter whole colour, which knocked those contrasts right down, and it looks a lot more suitable for the look that we're going for. So can't really go much further with that because we're going to start losing the details. So getting onto these like main decals, the main graphics, as I said, the HDA sheet is supposed to be a more accurate sheet, and it's just not in quite a few key areas. One of which is the side pennants. They're too small, they're too short, so couldn't really get much more wrong than that, so couldn't use those. The original stock sheet, the deltas are better. They're still a touch too small, but they're better. The docking ports on the HDA upgrade sheet are too big by a country mile, so I went with the stock docking port decals, which are also too big, but they're a lot better. The lower saucer sort of main Enterprise graphic that goes around the back sort of bulge of the saucer is way too big, like almost twice the size that it should be. So again, I've gone with the stock sheet, which is better, but again, not great, but it's better. And finally, and I can't understand how this ever got through and no one's ever noticed before, but the main ship registry right on the top of the decal could be argued as the focal point, like the main graphic of the entire thing. The USS Enterprise graphic on the HGA sheet doesn't have the red pinstriping around it. So I couldn't use that either. So, and again, it's too small. So and the main registry number is too small. So I've gone with the stock sheet there. So I mean, I'm laughing about it, but that's pretty bad. I mean, you would imagine that when you're doing decal sheets that's supposed to be more accurate than the stock version, that you're going to look at a photo or two and realise some of these things. But anyway, I won't bash them anymore because, you know, I've got around it and I'm using other alternatives. So the last few things to get on here now then are the tiny details, things like the red pinstriping around the phasers and the thrusters, and there's little red circles that go around the position lights and things like that. What I've done is I've made my own basic decal sheet to take care of those. And I'll give myself a few colour options there. Those bottom two red ones are slightly different colours. The camera can't really tell, but they're different shades of red slightly. So I'm going to pick which ones sort of match the colour aesthetic of the decals that I've got and go with those. They are provided on the HGA sheet and the stock decal sheet, but they're just too bold, so I prefer them, and they wouldn't fit because I painted those details. So that'll be about it once they're on, and then the project will be pretty much finished. So yeah, we've sort of leapfrogged and hop skipped and jumped right to the end, and it kind of goes that way with these builds. They take forever and they take forever, and then all of a sudden they're finished. So it's about time. So I'm going to get on with that and put these last few details on, and I'll be back once that's done, and probably wrap the video up there and save the last one for the very final project wrap up. So I'll see you in a minute. And there we are, all decals are done. That is it. The only thing to do now is to give it the last gloss coat and the satin sort of semi-matte finish after the gloss coat to seal everything in, and she is good to go to her new home. So one last thing that I didn't mention in the previous segment was this upgrade part didn't include a decal for the engine grill in there. Like, there's a grill detail, so I had to make my own, and it took a couple of iterations to get that sized right and to get it to fit properly, but got there in the end. And there we are. There's not a lot else to say for this video, so I'll be back with one last video to sort of give an overall wrap up and my final thoughts of the project and the build. As long as it's been, I'm going to have to sort of look back on it all and refresh my memory and give my thoughts on it all. But yeah, so it's been an experience, I'll say that, and one that I'm not in a massive hurry to kind of repeat either. This kit has definitely earned its infamous sort of status as being a difficult build. So, but I'll get to all that in the next video. So until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the last part of this 537 Enterprise build. So I'll catch you in a bit.